Podcasters Roundtable, round 40, PR 40. Huh? There's only one of those on this roundtable. I see that. PR 40. That's fun. Podcasting humor beyond iTunes. All right. So back on Podcasters Roundtable round 35, we did iTunes. We just started with that topic and we talked about anything related to iTunes. And that was a good one. We had a good time. And this time we're going to cover the other half. We'll see. We're going to...
The other third?
Yeah, see? That's what I talked about.
Sixth, other 12th, other...
I waited.
1/100th.
We made that joke was made in the pre-show before it went live, and I told Matt it was on him to deliver again. I was waiting. So anyways, yes, we're going to cover the other whatever and talk about everything that's not iTunes. In fact, I'm curious how many times how many times will we actually say the word iTunes? Probably a whole bunch, even though we're not talking about it, right? Let me give Dave's famous air quotes. I only have one hand free because, yes, I am holding the mic, not a PR40. All right, so very important. Go over to podcastersroundtable.com, sign up to the list, the email list over there, and submit your ideas for topics to be on the roundtable. That's how I know you're out there, and that's oftentimes how I choose people to be on the roundtable, and it's based on topic, not the order with which you signed up. So you can be chosen at any time, and that is exactly, we have 2 new roundtablers today, and each one was chosen right from that list based on either something they said or maybe they saw the announcement in the email, and they said, hey, I have something to add to that. So we got them on here. So let's meet the roundtable today. We'll start on the end opposite of me. And Addy, welcome, a first-time roundtabler you're in London, right?
That's correct. Greetings, everyone, from London, UK. I'm Addy from MHF Tech, which is a weekly technology podcast. You can find out more about that at mhftech.net, and that's where you can also sign up to the mailing list to receive your episodes via email.
Very cool. So Addy is representing our international roundtabler today. We usually do a pretty good job of getting someone on here from another country, which often means they're sacrificing sleep. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much. And
that's just mine.
Daniel, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity podcast and a bunch of other sites linked all from there.
Very cool. Go there, check them all out. And Mr. Dave Jackson, welcome back, my friend.
I'm Dave Jackson from schoolofpodcasting.com, and very glad to be here.
Awesome. Dave, tilt your camera down just a little bit, and maybe I can use you in the thumbnail. I'm not picky about video. No, not at all.
Not at all.
That's my job. And another new roundtabler. I'm going with Matt. It's Matthew. Welcome to the roundtable.
Thank you very much. I'm part of the the Mix Minus podcast. And Adi, nice to meet you. And Ray, Daniel, and David, you guys are integral to getting kind of the podcast started for many of us. So I just want to say thank you now that I have you here. And you make the learning curve not as painful as it could be.
Oh, perhaps someone would say we flattened the learning curve.
There you go.
I like that.
That is, of course, one of Dave's tagline. So his branding is working awesome on you. And I will say, I actually wanted to extend a thank you to Dave for all the mentions he's given on his show, and he plays little clips sometimes on his School of Podcasting, and that's awesome. And Daniel, usually he mentions it, he sends it out to the email list. Not today, but usually he sends out to the email list. So I just want to thank you guys for doing that and being part of this, because this is really where our 3 communities come together, right? This is the overlap. It's, we all have, when I say we, Daniel, Dave, and myself have shows about how to podcast, and the power users in that community listen to all of them, but those that don't meet up here. And so it's really cool to have that sort of commingling of audiences. And it's something I encourage any of you guys, whatever your niche is, go out there and maybe do a hangout with other people in your niche. I think the audience will really love it. And I really don't see any concern for people, now I'm going to go listen to Daniel instead of Ray, whatever. Just go out there. It's going to help more than it hurts. So, all right, beyond iTunes, let's get into this. Let me see. What's the best way to start? I guess what is the and this is different based on your show, I guess, but what would you say off the top of your head was the biggest directory not beginning with an I?
Stitcher?
I was gonna jump into this first, if you don't mind. I think the biggest directory out there, I'm gonna probably take a stab in the dark here and say, I'm gonna say Stitcher. Blind stab in the dark.
Yeah, I thought we'd hear everyone just shout out Stitcher actually, because Stitcher not that old actually. Dave? Do you recall when Stitcher came on the scene?
That's a great question. I would say a couple years. Daniel, any idea?
It's been several years.
Probably
I
longer.
think 2008 maybe, or 2009.
Dave will be on the Googles for that, see if he can come up with that one. But the point is really, in a short amount of time, I think they've emerged as the second largest directory outside of iTunes for the majority. Now, it doesn't matter. I mean, it could be different for your show. I think that the top 3 places you're going to see your show consumed are probably going to be iTunes, and probably then Stitcher, and maybe then your website. But this is going to be different for everybody, right? Who actually tracks this? Daniel, do you see the same thing?
I'm looking at my stats right now, courtesy of Blueberry, and I'm seeing that Stitcher is pretty far down in my list. I get twice as many plays through Downcast as I do for Stitcher, but the percentage there is quite small compared to iTunes, iPhone, and the podcast app for iTunes, or for iOS and iPad. Those are all much higher.
Is Overcast in there?
In my list, I don't even see Overcast.
I got a weird jump from that recently. Maybe it was because I was promoting it because I love it so much. You can't live without that smart speed function now. Gains you back 6 to 15 minutes per hour. And I think maybe I promoted it so much that people were downloading the directory from there.
So Dave, you found 2008. That's a long time.
Yep.
Now, was Stitcher always just podcasts? I mean, was it pure podcast from the beginning?
Yeah, it's always been, and just audio. It's never wanted anything to do with video. It's always been just podcast.
That was a long time ago.
Now, here's another thing. I'm looking at my stats as well whilst we're on the subject of stats very quickly here. I'm looking at my stats, and funnily enough, Internet Explorer is at the very top. And then the second thing, surprisingly, is Windows Media Player. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fudge cakes is going on here?
What do you think? Daniel, what do you think? I mean, it just, now this is interesting because, Addy, you're in the UK. Is Stitcher, as you're still indicating Stitcher's just as big, is iTunes as big?
I think
outside the US.
Outside the US, from what I've seen, I think iTunes is still probably the number one directory as far as I know. Also, I think TuneIn Radio, quite another interesting choice there, is another one that's quite big here. Stitcher is not that well known, but as far as I know, I think it's iTunes and TuneIn Radio as far as the outside the US contingent is concerned.
So I have to ask you, what is Deezer? Is it big in the UK where you're at? Do you know Deezer?
As far as I don't think I've heard of Deezer. I've heard the name bandied about a couple of times, but I don't think it's been in the podcast community in the UK from what I know. If anyone has some insight into that in the chat room, then let me know.
Well, Dave, go ahead, Matthew.
I was going to say, I believe that Deezer, because I really follow a lot of the streaming music stuff, Deezer is a kind of Spotify-like service from a lower base, but I think from a very European base. And they bought Stitcher, or had a partnership with Stitcher, and they're going to try to. You're seeing a lot of people try to kind of bring the music service and then get this audio content into there, so that you can really kind of have the best of all spoken word music in one place, which means good stuff for podcasting, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up, is because Deezer did purchase Stitcher, which by the sound of it sounded like they were kind of in danger, which is surprising. But
Stitcher is still around, but it's
yes.
It's kind of like operating as its own entity. So it's still there, but it's owned by Deezer.
Correct. Yeah, we see that a lot.
I was driving home to get prepared for this, and I actually listened to the Libsyn podcast because it can be very good on a monthly basis for giving you statistics, giving you kind of best practices. And Dave, they actually called you out in it because they were going to be talking about stats, and I guess you're very into that, which we all are when we do this. But they were actually saying that in this last month, I believe, that Stitcher was 2.8% of all Libsyn downloads to a lower base, and really something interesting because we're going to talk about this down the line with Google and Android kind of not being a part of the podcasting world, which is a real shame because they have so many devices out there. But they brought up the fact that Samsung now has a podcast app in their kind of bloatware, as you call it, in their services that they put on top of the Android, and that has seen a pretty big jump from a low base. So maybe there's something to that.
I'm looking at my stats from my Once Upon a Time podcast, which does not have a very techie following like the Audacity podcast does. And I see Samsung with Android in my Blueberry stats is higher than BeyondPod, than Stitcher Radio for iOS and Stitcher Radio for Android, not combined, but separately. So it looks like Android-wise, that's my highest item is the Samsung player, just barely leading above BeyondPod, just barely leading above Stitcher Radio for Android.
It's amazing.
So is Stitcher the place that most Android users, you think, are getting podcasts? If you want to reach an Android user, where are you going to tell them to go?
Yeah, Stitcher, because Stitcher is free.
Yeah, from a free point of view, and then probably Pocket Cast. There was a time last year, because of course first world problems, we all get into these things. I've been in the iTunes, iOS world the whole time, and then I had this weird thing where I said, I want to have a fling with Android, I think. And then when I was looking into it, I'm like going, what is my app that I'm going to be able to use for this, for that? And I looked, and Pocket Casts looks to be the one that's really across the different environments. So I got that, and I think that's probably a pretty good, along with BeyondPod and Stitcher. Those are probably pretty good ones.
So my question is, what do you guys consume podcasts on? I use Pocket Casts. I love it. I've used it for, gosh, it's probably since I've had a smartphone.
I'll go.
Me Overcast. Oh, sorry.
You go ahead, actually.
I use Overcast. I think it's not as feature rich as others, but before I got to Overcast, I don't know about you guys, but I would constantly, because of course I bought all of the apps. I mean, they're all $2 to $4 or $5 at most. So we're all podcasters. So you're kind of like, let me try this one, let me try that one. So I went back and forth between all of them. I really did fall on Downcast and then Pocket Cast, like you, Ray. I thought that was a great one. And then when Overcast came out, all this cast, when that one came out, I thought that really made a lot of sense because I think Marco Arment, who made Instapaper, made a lot of sense for simplifying news for me. And he seemed to be someone who's deeply into podcasting, as he has his own podcast. And so he was kind of going after it with a power user's point of view. And those services that he has a freemium version where you can get it and you can just listen to podcasts. And I think from a freemium point of view, it's not the greatest app because there's a lot that's left on the table if you're a Downcast or Pocket Cast user. But when you get into the power user and you get the $5, I believe it is, one time to unlock these different services, the smart speed is amazing, and I think the voice boost is pretty good in general for podcasts that maybe they don't do as good a job on their post-production.
So how do you get into Overcast?
How did I get into it?
How does a podcaster get their podcast into Overcast?
I believe Overcast is on it pulls from the iTunes directory, if I'm not mistaken, because I saw mine was just in there, so I believe it's just pulling from that. And really, it is an iOS app because they don't have really any Android exposure there. I'm still waiting for kind of a Chromecast icon to show up, but he seems really deeply into the iOS world. That's his world, and he just came out with an iPad app, and they just came out with the Apple in the car, which I don't know anybody who has that yet, but apparently that's the cool thing.
Right. And so, so there's an interesting thing here is when you list your show on iTunes, ding, you need like a little thing that goes up and counts how many times say iTunes on a beyond iTunes. It's in the title. It's 2 words in the title. It's in the title. So BeyondPod, was that a directory, BeyondPod? That's for Android, right? It's an app for Android.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So anyways, when you are in iTunes, you are then automatically pretty much in a whole bunch of other apps, right? Because they use the API. Daniel?
Yeah, 12 other apps that you are in. Podcruncher, Casterly, a bunch of them. Podcastplaces.com. Go there. It has this list. But one of them actually, like Beyond Pod, I believe it is, it doesn't actually directly pull from iTunes. No, yeah, it's Beyond Pod. Doesn't pull from iTunes, but it will recognize an iTunes podcast link. So if you have an iTunes podcast link on your website and someone has Beyond Pod, they tap on that and it opens your podcast in Beyond Pod on their Android device.
And that happens other places too, right? And some RSS, does Apple, well, I guess we're not talking about Apple, but that happens on an iOS device. It did at one time.
Right, yeah, on an iOS device, but that's kind of obvious. That's what you would expect.
Right.
But this is on Android that's
Gotcha.
detecting not just the RSS, but the iTunes link and
Right.
opening it in Beyond
It's cool.
Pod.
And so, do we, as producers, do we like this? Dave, do you like the fact that, hey, I submitted to iTunes, but now all these other places, all right, are sort of taking my show and putting them on their list? Daniel, do any of those run ads against your content?
Some of them do, yeah.
They do?
Well, like Stitcher, I don't think
Well, not
anyone-
Stitcher, because Stitcher you got to submit to. So, of the ones that
Right.
use the API, are any of
Oh.
those inserting ads?
No one inserts ads inside your content. As far
Okay,
as
I'm sorry.
ads
Well,
around
pre-rolls,
your content
round.
or in the app, I don't know. I haven't used all of them, and I can't remember.
So,
if
Dave,
anything
are you cool with that? It's like, hey, I submitted here, and all of a sudden, all of these other places. It's a nice convenience, or is it a double-edged sword?
It's pros and cons. It's easy to submit and get in multiple places, but what happens if tomorrow iTunes goes, you know what, we're spending a lot of money on servers that are going around pinging RSS feeds, and we've got a whole staff now. We're done with this stuff. What if they walked away? Now, are they going to? No, let's not get stupid. But it is the case of there's a lot of, we got a lot of our eggs in the iTunes basket, and what if they went to all these other people that are tapping into the API and said, get your own. We're tired of maintaining that. I don't know what's involved. Daniel might be able to comment on that in terms of.
I think from what I heard, Daniel, in one of the episodes of the Audacity podcast, I think he mentioned something about if iTunes, let's say, God forbid, iTunes were to go down tomorrow, and the whole podcast community screams about this, then I think it would still pull from your RSS feed that you've originally submitted, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. There are two different pieces, though, to this for podcasters. One is the directory, and one is the RSS feed. In any app, if the apps, depending on what Apple or any other company would do, if they took the directory offline, you're still subscribed to the RSS feed. So as long as your app continues to work that you're using and continues to run on whatever platform you use, then you'll continue to receive your podcast episodes that you're subscribed to. And like if Apple shut down the API and stopped letting people pull from their catalog, then I think what would happen is all of these other apps would just stop with, okay, we've got the catalog built up to this point. Anything further, you have to manually submit yourself to our catalog.
Yeah, that would mean a lot of work. And that's why I have this kind of mission in mind over 1 week when I'm not doing the show, to set up like a Google Doc of which I'll slowly but surely fill with all different podcast directories I've submitted to, and then make that public, saying that, okay, anyone wants to see where I'm at, boom, click on this link and you'll have that there for you. That's one thing I want to try and do, and I want to encourage everybody watching this broadcast to do as well.
Or you could go to Daniel's kind of done that over at podcastplaces.com.
What he's saying is making this personal. It's his list, so that if anyone wants to find him in any of these, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and because we've seen a couple of these, right? So you create your show, and you want to submit it to all these other places. I remember in the beginning, there was some talk that people would say, like, hey, some people fell in the camp, you should be on iTunes only. Funnel all of your audience there so that you can get the good rankings, get up towards the top, right? And then there's the go wide, right? So where are you guys, Matt, where are you at? Did you go wide? Obviously you're in other places, but
Yeah,
when you create your show.
I go completely wide. I got in there, I listened to you guys a lot early on, and I started submitting across every single, it could be a podcast directory for Christians, like anything I would submit to just to be out there. But really what I would do is when I put an episode out, I'll kind of over time, maybe share an episode from my site, share it from the iTunes link, maybe share it from Stitcher, because they all kind of bring different statistics to bear. And maybe a subject you did has legs to it. So, for instance, I did an episode with a girl reporter who won, or didn't win, but she was a finalist for a Pulitzer on a piece she did on the heroin epidemic in New Jersey. Very heavy subject. And that thing lives forever. So that went out at first. It got a bunch of downloads, but then pretty much every month we all see the news on this. So anytime news comes out, I kind of give my thoughts on it, and then I say, if you want more on this, check this out. And people have been very open to that, because it really is, it's not kind of link baiting. It's given them something that they really can get a better long-form feel for it. And it's really driven the thing along. And I try to use all the different places, really Stitcher, iTunes, my site, because you can get a lot of statistics across them that help that maybe you can't just get from a Libsyn, which I use.
Yeah, with Stitcher having to submit your own show, so there's a couple places. What are they? TuneIn, Stitcher,
Miro,
is it Miro? There used to be BlackBerry. I don't know where that went. There used to be Zune.
Microsoft, yeah.
These sort of exist. Some of them still sort of exist. I think technically you can find some platform that has their directory available to you, but there's many that you many pull from the API from iTunes. Many you have to submit. So what do you think? What's the motivation there? I know with Stitcher, we didn't used to get the ping for their stats. So if you host on something like Libsyn or Blueberry, it now is included in your stats that someone listened on Stitcher. But it used to be you had to go and get your stats. Daniel, why do you think that some have chosen to make you submit? Right. So say if you want to be here, you got to submit, or some just pull from the iTunes directory.
It's just their own decision of what they want to do and how they want to do it as well. Because, like, take Spreaker, for example. Spreaker hosts your media. You can submit your RSS feed to them, but they aren't going to copy your files unless you give them your RSS feed. Same thing with Stitcher, somewhat, is that you have to submit to them, or someone has to submit your show to them. And I think it's just their decision. And in a way, that's kind of nice, because that means that those directories are then filled with podcasts that want to be there, and thus most likely are podcasts that are actively hosted.
Yeah, and I think
iTunes has hundreds, thousands of podcasts that are dead now.
Yeah, and I think that, with Stitcher, they're going to run ads around your content. So there may be some motivation. I know they also sort of down convert your file to make it actually lower quality. Now, I'm seeing in the chat room lots of people, I think Nick and was it Ron? I think a lot of people said that most of their audience, a lot of their audience comes from Stitcher. So as a producer, I'm not a huge fan of Stitcher, because they change the quality that I go out at, which I don't like. Or I'm sorry. As a producer, I like it, because what they're doing for podcasts is they're spreading it wide. They're bringing new people in. They're making it available to Android users. As a consumer, I hate it, because I'm not going to listen to the same show that I can hear in better quality. But I'm a podcaster, so I'm a little more anal about that. Obviously, most people aren't concerned. Go ahead, Addy.
Can I just say, in order to kind of counter for that fact that they decrease the quality, I actually export out in 128K stereo, in order so that I can, still get that audio quality across, even if Stitcher, downgrades that quality.
It used to be like 32. And it's still going to sound, it's going to have the artifacts that you're going to get at 32. But don't get me wrong, it's really nitpicky. I wish they'd increase it. Dave, it sounds like Blog Talk Radio might be going high quality. There's another platform, right? Of course I go to Dave when I say BTR.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I was playing with their beta system hours ago. I just got off, they're going to 128 stereo. And they're doing some really interesting things over there.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I can't say a whole lot, but they are going to 128 stereo, and they were on the new media show with Todd and Rob talking with the CEO, and they're dumping some bucks and people at this thing. So yeah, they're going to ramp it up.
Yeah, and Todd is, well, gosh, Rob from Lipson will tell you Google's not your friend as a podcaster. They're not a friend of podcast. And Todd often talks about on New Media Show, kind of where is Google, right? So what do you guys think? I mean, it is sort of ridiculous that Google doesn't really have, I guess, a directory that they could use as a native directory on their phones. Why do you think we have not seen Google step up and do anything for podcasting besides FeedBurner, but that's not doing much?
As we know, Google has their Play Store where you can download various podcast clients, if that's the correct terminology. I think it's Podcatcher, isn't it? That's the terminology. But anyway, I think the reason why Google have not stepped up their game is because they're being lazy about it, or they simply don't care about the whole podcast movement. I'm just throwing ideas out here. But
how much money does Google make from podcasting?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest reason why.
And I wonder if it's because Apple kind of took the mantle. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that. I'm sure you did, because it was very kind of profound for podcasting. But The Verge had that article about the kind of new stars of podcasting, and they did a nice video piece, which was actually 10 minutes on podcasting, talking to real people, Alex Bloomberg from Startup and ESPN. But they brought up a good point, I think the PRX gentleman. He said that Odeo, and anybody who read Hatching Twitter knows the story, Odeo was the kind of audio podcasting company that was the precursor to Twitter. And why did Odeo go under? Because Apple came out with their podcasting in iTunes. And I often wonder if, while it was great for Apple and we like it, and now Apple is like 2/3 of the entire market of podcasting, did Odeo not making it hurt everything else? Because maybe we need a third-party platform that's above everybody else, like a Netflix, where you can get it on anything. It's kind of platform agnostic. What do you think?
Well, Yahoo back in the day had an actual directory before iTunes, and then iTunes came out and they went, same thing. They went, never mind. And it went away.
You would actually be surprised on one of the apps, and you might not guess this, but I'm looking at the list here. It's a web app, Android, Windows Phone, TV set-top box, automobiles, iOS, BlackBerry, and Windows. Any guesses on what app that is? iHeartRadio.
Of course.
It's on almost everything. They just don't have a desktop app or a Linux app or a Kindle Fire app.
And you know what's even hurting iHeartRadio a lot more right now is that they're not in the UK. I mean, there are workarounds where, yes, you can use proxy servers and all that, but then that just gets messy for the average listener who just wants to get their darn content.
It's already hard enough to get into iHeartRadio. They don't make it easier for a producer to be there either.
Yeah.
Well, isn't the silliest thing overall that we're sitting here doing a video podcast on Google Plus, that Google Plus comes out month after month, they come out with less money to get, it's like $2 a month now to get 100, I think, gigs or megs, I don't know, I'm getting messed up now, but they have a ridiculous amount that you can get per month of storage. They have the storage, they have the capacity, they have the audience to a ridiculous degree. I mean, is Apple still just, I mean, a lot of people pay for it and they do very well, but aren't they still just like 30% of the market and Android almost has the rest? They're missing a real opportunity here to jump into this. And maybe a lot of this stuff that's coming out now from Serial, from Startup, the Renaissance, even though a lot of people have been doing these, the Renaissance of podcasting. And, I wonder if maybe they jump in at some point and think, well, maybe we can find a way to sell our advertising somewhere else, because that's their biggest key.
Well, here's Go ahead, Addy.
We're talking, whilst we're on the thing about other directories apart from iTunes, can I just add another podcast client that a lot of these different set-top boxes might use, your Android phone might use, your tablet might use? XBMC. You've got a video add-on or an audio add-on, depending on whether you want a video or audio podcast, and it pulls from iTunes, but still, for the most part, you can then pull down podcasts using XBMC. Again, it's supposed to be a home cinema thing, but still.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is, actually. It's like some type of...
XBMC it actually stands for Xbox Media Center. It came out of a hack for the Xbox game console, but now they've turned it into XBMC, which is a home theater solution.
And so that sounds extra geeky to me, right? That is definitely hard. Your average user is not getting that. And hopefully if, one of these things being beyond iTunes, and we'll talk about this a little more, is getting more people, or getting podcasts in front of more people, right? So hopefully some of these services are making that easier, and it seems like a lot of them are sort of vying for that sort of car space, which will be very interesting. But back to Google for a second. I think this was first. I think Elsie Escobar, the feed from Libsyn, I think she mentioned this. I think that's where I heard it. It's still one of the best things I've heard that I don't understand why they're not doing this. We know Google, if you have an audio podcast, it's not being indexed necessarily because it's not listening to your audio and it doesn't know what's sort of inside your episode. But they have technology that can listen to audio. But, back in the day, I don't know if it's still this way. When you search on Google, one of the first things you're going to see is like a YouTube video. They used to rank really high. I think they actually stopped doing that as much, but it used to rank really high. One of your first options was a YouTube video. Google loves content. They love good content, updated content, rich content. Podcasts have all of that. Why in the search results, if I'm searching for the ATR 2100 and there happens to be an episode that talked all about it, and they could get this based on show notes. They don't have to use the technology to listen to your audio, although that's coming. I know they're working on it. In YouTube, they have some translation. But anyways, if they ranked podcasts, a podcast that was highly relevant to a search term, then imagine people being exposed to your show based on a Google search. That would be incredible, it seems to me. They've got their ad potential there, right? Because they can advertise against that. And clicks. And so I do not understand why. It makes me want to go to Google and say, why? Certainly I'm not the one, or Elsie's not the one who has thought of this.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that Google is simplifying search. Again, they used to do the things like you had the author snippet where you could get with Google Plus, you get your picture there. They cut that out. They cut out video snippets. Yes, if you search for something on Google, you do still see YouTube results very high. But if your website has an embedded video and uses all of the meta tags, that video no longer shows up. If you're just on the main search, if you're under the video search, well, then it's mostly just all YouTube, really. And Google could implement something like another standard to say, if you use this particular meta tag, we'll place an audio player on there, kind of like Twitter cards or Facebook cards, where it displays some rich content there. The thing is, that distracts from Google's moneymaker, AdWords. Those advertisements need to still stand out and be the most relevant to people. If something distracts from the advertisements, then that means Google makes less money.
Yeah, but I mean, you Google something, you click through to it, right? I mean, I'm talking about, what's the difference, right? I mean, if Google knows that every week you update your website, it's got audio content on it, and then it can tell you're sort of an authoritative source and then link you to people that are doing searches for that content, why not just link someone to the web page? Well, I would think that web page should rank high in Google's eyes, because it just the incredible potential for, even talking about discovery, people would just constantly be finding new shows and their mind would be blown. They'd be like, oh my God, there's a whole show on this, right? I mean, a lot of people wouldn't stick around. I mean, one of the rubs on podcasts and hour-long type content or any kind of longer form content is you can't glance it and know what's in there, right? But if Google is maybe picking out pieces, heck, even time codes. I really see that on some of these apps now, if you put in time, I think, does this work on an app? If you put in a time, it works for YouTube, then it'll, like, if you click the time marker, it'll go to that part of the podcast. Have we seen that work? I feel like I just heard someone talk about that. Like, I think it works somewhere. Maybe?
It might be on Overcast.
Maybe Overcast does it.
There.
It's coming. I think that has to be coming, right? So that you could sort of time mark your stuff. I love websites who do this. I don't do it. It's a lot of work. But if you put in, like, at 3:25, we talk about the ATR 2100. By the way, Jeffrey, that is the mic that Matt is using. He asked that in the chat. It's the same one that you see me holding. and then someone can go right to that content, right? So you don't have to press play, listen to the intro, listen to 2 minutes of music, listen to what happened that day with my cat, and then learn about the ATR, right? I mean, we've listened to Dave's show enough to know I don't need a half hour of what's going on with how to pick out your dinner, Dave. That was great, by the way. That's an inside joke. Dave did a show. He puts in the sound effect where he walks to a different room and he's in the room by himself. I loved that. I just heard that last night. That was awesome stuff. So anyways, I just thought that could be a good play for Google. Now, that's not them sort of they're supporting podcasts that way. Certainly is a newer way to sort of spread podcasting, but that would be cool.
Even if Google came out with a service where they automatically translated, they have so much genius there, where they translated your podcast so that they could have some kind of transcript of it that could align with AdWords the way it reads your Gmail, so that it gives you ads, or it doesn't read it, but it
right.
looks for contextual cues. It just they're leaving a lot there. It just aligns with so much of their core competence, and I wonder if it's almost because Apple took the lead in the beginning and they just don't want to. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's maybe in the beginning, but that doesn't. They're not like it's not like them to not put up a fight if they know they can. Right. They have such a big reach.
Maybe they're just caught napping.
Maybe they. I mean, we know they're not big fans of RSS. Maybe they just hate RSS.
I just love the fact that on one hand, it's a bummer that it's such a small amount of people listening over there, but on the other hand, if something happens over there, there's so much room for improvement. That's the good news. It's just a matter of how long do we have to go, hello, is anybody listening? To where they finally, wake up, or there's some sort of, Stitcher had a good shot at it, becoming like the, app. It'd just be nice if there was something that you didn't have to buy or was non-deletable.
There was once Google Listen, you may remember, but Google Listen was really weird, and then Google killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Google Listen, I think Google Listen, there is a hack where you can just simply download your MP3s, put them in like a music folder, and then they'll appear up in Google Play Music. But then again, that is a hack, and that's something you don't want to have your listeners do.
Right.
Do you guys like the idea of having your music and your podcast together? Because I use Google Music All Access now, and they're buying these companies that add mood-based music services to it, and then they're putting it into into YouTube, so you could have music there. Are they maybe missing the opportunity to push it in there? I heard someone say no, but interested what you think about that.
Well, I know there's rumors of podcasting coming to Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So back to the Deezer thing. We've got Deezer, which is a music service. I think that you're going to see a lot of these realize, hey, we need to get into talk, right? So probably Spotify, Pandora may, in the not too distant future, all have a podcast library. What do you think, Dave?
Well, again, what do they need? Why do they need people to listen? So they can put ads in front of them. They just need content. I mean, why did iHeartRadio, let podcasters in there? Because every time I listen to Ask the Podcast Coach, once I dig and dig and dig to find it, because have fun finding anything on iHeartRadio, and have fun telling iHeartRadio it's not called the Podcast Coach Show because nobody's listening. They play an ad right in front of my, again. So that's before, and if you're on their website, they'll play a video before your audio podcast starts. So they're all about putting the ad in front of people.
And let me ask about that. There are these places that run ads around your content. I'm assuming everyone here thinks that it's worth it, right? I think we're all on Stitcher. For me, it is worth the exposure. They've got a company to maintain. I want them to stick around. That said, I don't have a choice of what ads go in there. I don't even listen there, so I don't really know what kind of ads. I should check what kind of ads they're running, against my content. But, kind of some control you don't have.
Yeah, what's really funny about that is you fall into the same issue kind of with YouTube too. Everybody gets this free great place where you can post video and it's really easy to embed across the internet. Where I work, we had a client. I'm like a web development company type thing, and we built the site for them. And it was somebody who was trying to become the governor of a state in our country, and so they made an organization that would serve their interests kind of, and they use YouTube to put their info out. We put the YouTube video up, And all of a sudden, when the person went to play it from the organization, there were weirdly dancing Nazis in front of the video, and it might have been some kind of joke, but they sent an email to me and they said, "Why are there dancing Nazis, and can we get them out of there?" And I said, it's bizarre, but we really can't.
No,
So,
you can. You can choose not to monetize your videos, and then
That's
the
true.
ads won't display before your videos.
that's a good point. Thank you.
But then also, just simply use that.
But it's a great story, though.
But they're poorly dancing Nazis. That's where I draw the
But in all seriousness, though, I think I mean, I'm sorry to go off on a tangent like this. One of the problems us content creators face is that if people are going to run pre-roll ads, then there will be that small percentage of people who use something like AdBlock Plus or another ad blocker to skip those pre-roll ads to get to the content. Now, do you think, I mean, again, this is a tangent, but still, do you think this is a serious issue, or do you think I'm just being too paranoid?
What are you worried about? I mean, are you worried about your ads not being heard?
No, it's because, okay, here's how I see it. I mean, I'm thinking of it on a double-edged sword here, in that it could mean that, yes, let's say that I've got, okay, the way I'm seeing it is that, yes, it can be a boon for the listener in that they won't need to have to hear any adverts. They can just jump in and get straight to the content, jump out. But also, I mean, this is not me, but I'm also thinking for other content creators looking to make money, they want to play these ads. Those people that use ad blockers are kind of stopping them from making the revenue they might need. But then again, this is a tangent.
I don't think it's a big, I mean, this is the same thing you hear everywhere. Like, if I put something online, people are going to steal it, right? If I have a digital product, they're going to give it to their friend. It's sort of just something you, at the current time, we sort of live with that, right? I mean, I don't feel like that, that is going to be a massive problem where if, you're getting some cut out of that, you're going to be cut out. I don't know. Most people do the right thing. I mean, I guess maybe you can make an appeal, be like, hey, please don't use ad blocker because I'm trying to make a little bit of money to keep the show on the air. But I'm not too concerned, Dave.
Well, and if you don't like it, you do what Podcast One did. You yank your stuff.
Yeah.
Content to do what you want.
And that happened on Stitcher, I guess, just now. Now, do you guys find with Stitcher that, I think Stitcher was the one who came out with the stats, I don't remember where I heard it, but that the average podcast is listened to for 25 minutes. Do you think it's because of the Stitcher user? Because I think Stitcher feels more transient and kind of ephemeral, where you kind of listen to it. I think it still probably only downloads the most recent episode, and then you have to stream the older ones. Do you think it's because of the listener there, or do you really think that there's some kind of magic number there that it stays within, 25, 30 minutes? Didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, but I was wondering what you guys thought.
It was actually Spreaker that came out with that information.
You'll hear that that's typical of a commute, right? Is right about in that time. That's why a lot of people say, hey, do a podcast. It's about 32 minutes, 32.8, whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know if it's, of course, in anything like that, it could be, certain person uses this platform and they tend to be listen more. But I think when you get a massive amount of numbers, I mean, if you want to go look at you can see that stat inside Stitcher, and that's one of the cool things about being on Stitcher is they have this stat for like how long the average person listens, how many of your audience drops off. It's 3/4 the way through, and don't get depressed when you look at that, right? I think when you get a lot of numbers, when you come to averages, things start to look depressing. But there's still a large chunk of your audience consuming most of the content.
The way I see that is that if people are going to look at those stats, my advice is to look at it and then compare it to what content you're covering in that particular episode, and then you can draw an analysis from that. And this is what I'm trying to say, always try and be positive about things and say that, okay, it seems that person X didn't like this thing on how to build a PC. Okay, again, just a silly example, but you get the idea. They didn't like how to build a PC. I should probably do some other kind of content or something like that. But that's the idea, to try and use those stats to gauge exactly what kind of content your listeners like.
Yeah, you can help it. You can help use it to shape your content for sure. And we're talking beyond iTunes. This does not necessarily mean right now. All we've talked about really are podcast directories. What I love about having a topic like that's 2 words and we don't say much more about it is that it's kind of like what's our perception of what that means. And we've really just talked about directories. I mean, this could mean beyond iTunes could mean YouTube, SoundCloud, right? Could mean really anywhere else, your own website, all these different places that your podcast can live. And I think I said it in the near the beginning that your own website is probably going to be a place where a lot of people are going to consume your content. So I hope everyone's sort of optimized their website, meaning that their player is HTML5 friendly or mobile friendly, that when someone comes there to the website, they can click play on their website. I mean, what about... Go ahead, Daniel. It looks like you got something to say.
Did you guys see the video from that was basically the start of advertising cereal and how to subscribe to a podcast where it's I forgot his name, but the
Ira
guy,
Glass.
Ira Glass with his grandmother or
Yes.
someone there. And the description that they gave is visit the website, press play.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be the easiest thing. That's even easier for a person than installing an app for your show.
I was going to say, so, we hear that, Rob will tell us have your own app, Rob from Lipson, because people are so familiar with apps, right? More so than they are with podcasts, they know how to go get an app. So that is another beyond iTunes. So you may be selling in iTunes, but you can sell it in Android, Windows, right? So does anyone have an app?
Not
I tried,
yet.
but
Not yet, but that is something that's in the pipeline as far as I'm concerned. It's just kind of knowing how to design it. The way I see it is that if I'm going to do something, I'd rather go all out as opposed to be half-hearted. I want to make sure that it's done right and make sure that it's easy for the user to use.
I agree with that, but that's also a lot of podcasters fall into that and don't start their show when, they took their first year and when they could have been producing episodes when not that many people were listening, and now they're starting from, they're kind of a year behind. So I agree with you. I don't have an app for one of those, almost that reason alone, because A, it's hard to produce your own app. B, I have not really found a system yet that I want for my type of app. But, if I was just interested in getting my podcast out there, I think there's some good options. Spreaker, I like the look of Spreaker's clean app. It's nothing to it except for, a list of your shows, but it's pretty nice and it's affordable. So an app is one way to go outside. YouTube, I think in a recent video that I'm actually still producing, I think I called this show Podcasters Roundtable. I said I have an audio-only podcast with a video element, or do I have a video show that is distributed via audio podcast? It's a toss-up, right? Because record this. Is it chicken before the egg? Because it would be that I have a video show that's then put into a podcast, right? Since that is first. But here we are on Google Plus Hangouts. We are recording live a podcast, or at least what will be. This never has to be a podcast, but I'm sort of using both types of distribution, right?
well, if I can speak, Ray,
Yep.
I've actually tried to recently, because I think with podcasting, it's constantly trial and error, and it's a fun kind of trial and error. We're like, we're like homebrew ham radio people in many ways. And so I did notice an effect from YouTube on accident. At my job, we produce podcasts for clients as well, and I was testing something with multiple cameras. And so me and an associate, I just said, hey, let's sit down and let's just do a test on the new Roku, or no, I keep calling it Roku, the new Amazon Fire TV stick. Let's just sit down and do 10 minutes. We'll test it. We'll see how it looks on YouTube. Didn't think anything of it. Put it up. It got thousands of views.
Wow.
And so it's sort of, and then I'm like, ooh, there might be something there. But it was because there wasn't a product called that before, and we happened to do it at that moment. So it went out. It was at the top of the directory. But it made me think there might be some kind of element to this, because we are on demand with podcasts. We can do live too as well. But if we're doing them by ourselves, and maybe in one episode that's an hour, you might touch 3 or 4 subjects. I thought, what if you recorded the segment of each of those subjects on your, your Hangout? You let each of those subjects go out to see if that targeting and those keywords can catch, and then you're recording it also into your digital recorder through your board or through your Zoom maybe, and then you put that out as a podcast as well, and you kind of get the best of all worlds, I think. I mean, that's at least my hypothesis right now.
That can be a great way to do it. One thing, though, I have to challenge whenever someone says thousands of views. I have a video in my network that has, I think now 25,000 views on YouTube for an audio podcast, and that sounds impressive. But the sad truth is that 95% of those 25,000 people dropped off in the first 90 seconds.
That's a good
By
point.
about 2 or 3 minutes in, there is only 2.5% of the audience left because it's audio only, just with the cover on the screen. And you might think, well, that's cool. You got however many 100 people that is who watched it, but that means you also offended 24,000 people who will never come back because they'll think that you're doing this fake video again.
Now, wait a minute.
You look at, to see those stats, go into YouTube, into your Creator Studio, click on a video when you're looking in your stats, and then on the left side, go to audience retention, and you'll get to see that drop off to see how many people, what's the percentage.
That's interesting.
Now, wait a minute. I don't know where I read this, but I don't know if this is relevant to this, but in any case, I read somewhere that there are a lot of people out there who will, pull up their YouTube in their web browser, pull up some music, and then leave it in the background to play whilst they're working.
Some people, yes.
Yeah, and music tends to be a different thing, right? You have a very young viewership on YouTube listening, and that's where they are getting their music from. It's free, let's face it. I mean, what's funny is when I put my daughter down at night, and Clementine, she loves this song, and I was like, I actually opened Spotify, realized I didn't have the subscription, so I couldn't use it on my phone. I was like, I know this exists on YouTube. I pulled it up. It's like a little cartoon scene. So every night I pull up YouTube and I play that for her in audio. And I put the phone flat so she can't see it because she's like, what is under there? I want to see that. No, close your eyes and listen to music. So we do that. But I think it plays more for music. I have never thought, I want to hear this podcast. I'll go get it at YouTube.
Right.
Well, when I'm at work, I'll watch. I like the Joe Rogan show, and that's an amazing podcast in the sense that he does 3 hours every time, and somehow people listen to it, and he'll do 4 or 5 a week. Blows my mind. But sometimes I'll watch that one, and it's really just the YouTube version of the.
And that's a video, though. I mean, exactly.
Oh, video. Sorry, yeah. Yep.
I mean, it's talking head
audio,
video, but it's not just I took my audio, I put up an image, and I slapped it up on YouTube, right?
Right. Exactly right.
In terms of this beyond iTunes and distribution, and there's Facebook and Twitter, and I think Daniel mentioned Twitter cards. There is now, with Libsyn, SoundCloud, if you put these links in Twitter or Facebook, it'll create a nice audio player that plays natively inside that environment, Facebook or Twitter. And I think actually Spreaker might do that too. But anyways, so there are some that will bring up this player and play. And then some people say, who browses Twitter, clicks play on a podcast and listens to that for an hour, right? Or Facebook, and they can't shuffle through their feed. But I think, I don't remember who brought this up recently, but might have been Seth on Google Plus, Wrestler, I think his name is. Made a good point that, it may serve the purpose of just introducing people to your content that they can then go jump off and listen to it later. You may click it in Twitter, hear first few minutes, and be like, ooh, that's good, and maybe you link out to it or something. So that's interesting. But then Daniel's counterpoint is that maybe you just made a lot of people upset. And I think there's a big difference there between YouTube when they were expecting to get a video type content versus Twitter where it says, here is a show about this subject. So,
I saw a great example. There's a guy named Barry Katz. He's been the manager for just about every major comedian, Dave Chappelle, you name it, they've been there. And he does a show where he interviews comedians and people in like high-level TV execs. And what he does is he takes about a question, maybe two, puts it on YouTube, and then in the video he has images on each side to subscribe in iTunes, subscribe in whatever. And so when you go there, he goes in with in YouTube, it's annotations, but those images throughout the whole video are links to go to iTunes and subscribe. And I saw that and I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool use of YouTube.
Yeah, it's a good idea because it's more content discovery and then linking out because YouTube will let you do that. But it's that much more work for a producer. So it depends on what it's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys brought up SoundCloud. Or is anybody using the SoundCloud? I know it's in beta right now, but is beyond? I sort of think SoundCloud could be good if you want to put clips of maybe a longer podcast. But I don't know about you guys, but it seemed like a very...
I use it for different... So I use it for clips for certain things that just aren't going to go into a podcast feed. I'm demoing a mic or something like that. I just want to put on Twitter. I use it at work extensively as a test because they were, for a while, the only ones who were doing this, as I mentioned, the native sort of player inside of Facebook. Yeah. There's a period over the last year where it worked really well, and we've seen tremendous uptake, thousands of new listens for each episode, but we have a large Facebook following, so it works in that case. People easily share it. That's how I'm using it. Now that Libsyn can do that, that's nice because it's just going to be built into your stats and you don't have to go out to another place. I did see in one instance that one episode, and it was a recent discussion. I do a science-based network, and one of them is a show just all about viruses, and we had the discussion about Ebola quite often in the most recent months, and that on SoundCloud went viral. And I don't know if it's just because it was news and topical, easily shareable. Don't know what it was, but that was one of the first episodes where I saw that it just took off on that platform and not as much as it did somewhere else. So there is a chance that you can be picked up by the community there. But again, that's another point of distribution that you got to go out there. You have to upload it and stuff like that. So
now don't get me wrong. I think SoundCloud could be a useful thing, but the one thing that I wanted to do for me is so that, let's say I want to get myself an ad deal. I mean, this is going into the more marketing side of the whole Be on iTunes thing. I guess I want to say that I wanted to kind of then count it into my main stats, which I pull from Blueberry, so I can then go to a potential advertiser and say, hey, look, I've got X thousand downloads or something like that. And then they can say, okay, we're going to give you this amount of money per show. That's my only thing that I want to see SoundCloud do.
Sure, and I have that on here on my list as just pooling stats, ? Right? Because if you are in some of these other places that don't necessarily ping your stat service like a Blueberry or Libsyn, then you're going to have to go out and gather those stats. That said, if you have an advertiser, I don't see why you can't do a little bit of work, go out to these various places and get your stats. If you do a video show, video is a lot harder to distribute than audio because you oftentimes have to go out to all these different places and upload the stuff individually, and then to get your stats, you're going to have to go out and get those. But it doesn't stop you from sort of, aggregating your stats. Do you guys have anywhere that you're distributing that you have to go out and get your stats beyond your main host?
Spreaker and iHeartRadio.
Right. But not a problem for you. I mean, do you imagine that would be a problem if you had an advertiser?
No, I mean, anytime you have stats, the beauty of stats is you can shape those bad boys any way you want. Mm-hmm. It's like you can just say, here's my total stats, or you can give them a breakdown. They could probably care less that 3% of your audience is on SoundCloud, and instead of saying, well, I asked my audience and 3 people said this and 2 people said that, you can always say, well, 60% of the audience said this. You don't have to say it was 3 versus 2.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right math, but you could always massage the data to present it in the most positive light.
And with an advertiser, they just want listens. They just want to get in front of people.
Yeah.
Do you ever send from your websites just to get the better analytics, just to test out there, maybe A/B test that, just to see what Google Analytics is saying on referrals and things like that, even if maybe they're not listening, but you see who brings them in?
I check that every now and then.
I actually do check my Google Analytics on a regular basis, and I find strangely because what's it called? Add This, which is that thing which gives you that whole share to Facebook, share to Reddit, and so forth. I do actually see a few people here and there actually coming into the actual post for the episode from Reddit, because I post to different subreddits. for my episodes.
I think Reddit's a beast that we're all a little old for, but it's unbelievable how much goes on in there.
True.
Yeah. I mean, and the point is really there are just numerous places, countless places that you could go out and get your content in front of other people, right? And that's sort of, if you started podcasting and you knew that, I got to do a show and I've got to put it in front of, a lot of people, I'm going to go to iTunes. Well, there's a whole world beyond iTunes, and hopefully you've been exposed to some of that here. But we will wrap up. I want to thank everyone in the chat room as we go out here. If you have one final thought, you can add that. You don't need to tell us what your show is, or definitely tell us where we can find more of your content, so we can hear more of the great opinions that everyone's been sharing. And I will say, I had several things on my list. This was great. We didn't get to all of them, and I would stay here for 2 hours if I could. In this case, I do have to run, but I don't want to hold everybody. In a live show, it feels a little different. I always say it's lame when podcasters say, "Oh, we're almost out of time." Really, whose time? But in a live setting, it is nice to let people go at some point. But we can revisit this. What's nice is we often wrap these topics into other topics as we go along. And, of course, if you are on the roundtable, you're free to bring up any of this stuff because we don't really care. We start at one place and we let it go where it wants. But I will also say I think Dave is familiar with this. Lou Mongello, I think maybe I heard it on Dave's show. Meetups, is that also beyond iTunes? I would say so. Get out there and meet your audience in real life, or meet people in real life and share your content in with your niche in IRL, in the real world. So that might be another fun way to go beyond iTunes, and I think Lou is a big advocate of that. So, all right, well, check out podcastersroundtable.com. Sign up for the list so I know you're out there and we can get you on to another round. And thanks again for joining us. And Addie, thanks for joining us on your first roundtable.
It's been a great pleasure. Make sure I want everyone to go to mhftech.net, get yourself signed up on the newsletter, and I'll email you your episodes. And also, whilst I'm on that, I'm going to also email you, if you do get on that list in the future, look out for this, a full list of all the podcast places that I'm on, so that you don't have to worry about getting your podcast at all.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I'm also a fan of that beyond iTunes, right? If I like a show enough, I may sign up to get it by email so that I can so I know, because I'm always on email. So that's also another good resource. Make sure you have a way for people to get your show via email. Daniel, thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you, Ray. And yeah, I agree. Email is great, direct, personal connection. You can find me at, I'm going to give you a different website address now because it's relevant to this, podcastplaces.com. That's my list of everywhere you and your podcast should be. Right now it has all the apps and directories out there that you can sort and filter, and more is coming to it. Podcastplaces.com, and on Twitter at the Ramen Noodle.
Cool. Yes, I highly recommend that. Go check it out. And you support Daniel. He makes awesome content. So that's a double bonus in my book. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm Dave Jackson, schoolofpodcasting.com. I'm going to leave it at this. You can put, I said this in a Facebook group, you can put candles and icing on a cake. I can put it on a table with the finest tablecloth, and you can have people sing happy birthday, but in the end, if the cake tastes like caca, nobody's going to eat it. So when in doubt, if you're not sure what's going on with iTunes, if you're not sure why you're not getting, ask the people who are eating the cake. So ask your audience, hey, what do you think? Is this good? Is it bad? And that doesn't require iTunes. When in doubt, it's you and the audience, and go from there. So, end of rant.
Awesome. And where can we find your caca a poo poo cake, Dave?
Schoolofpodcasting.com.
Awesome. Go get some caca cake over at schoolofpodcasting.com. Not at all. Love Dave's show. And what's that?
We're having it for dinner.
Oh, dinner. What's for dinner? Caca poo poo. All right, that's a Dave quote. Anyways, go check it out. I love Dave's show, actually. Better than my own, probably. All right. Lots of fun. And on the end, Matt, thanks so much for joining us on your first roundtable as well.
Oh, this was great, guys. I really appreciate it. I will spell my name because I once spelled my own name wrong on dog tags that I had made when I was a young kid. So it's MatthewMcQueeny.com, MatthewMcQueeny.com. On Twitter, it's at Matt McQueeny. And look forward to future roundtables if you'll invite us back.
Fantastic. You gave us your name. You want to give us a website? Where can we find your show?
Oh, yeah, MatthewMcQueeny.com.
Oh, maybe you sent that. Okay, perfect. That's why I spelled it. Good. Good to do that. You know, that's a difficult thing in the internet age. Sometimes I hope you have the misspelling of your name also as a .com.
Fat fingers. That's
There
what
you
we call
go.
'em, right?
There you go. All right, everybody. Thanks again to the chat. You guys rock. Who was here? We had John. Let's see. Who knows? What's John's last name? Buchanan? I don't want to say that wrong.
Buchanan.
Yeah, Buchanan. Ron M. I forget. Nick Suberlin joined us. We got Jeffrey Holbrook. As I scroll through names, they're blurry, so I'm going to mispronounce. Barbara Phillips, thank you. And we go way back here. Some people early on. This is part of that. Who was watching the beginning and then dropped off? But the chat room always giving cool stuff. Fred Castaneda, of course, a power listener. So thanks again, everybody. And that's it. We will see you. That was round 40. So congrats to the Roundtable. 40 rounds. Pretty cool. I've enjoyed all 40 of them. And I'm looking forward to 41. We will see you next time. Podcasters Roundtable. Until that next time, wave goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.